Belle Island, Newfoundland is situated just north of St. John's in beautiful Conception Bay. Measuring approximately 11 kilometers in length and 5 kilometers in width, it probably got its name for the unique rock formation on the western end of the island. Belle Island's spectacular scenery is abundant and has become a photographer's delight. The sheltered community of Lance Cove is one area which makes an ideal photographic subject. Wabana is the hub of Belle Island, a quiet, peaceful community. It remains bright and colorful. A drive or walk in any direction will attest to the fact that the residents continue to take pride in their homes. Wabana wasn't always the peaceful area that it is today. 40 years ago, the town was one of the busiest mining communities in Newfoundland. Join us now as we step back in time and visit Belle Island during another time, another place. Belle Island was one of many fishing stations situated around Conception Bay in the 1500s. Settlement of the island began in the 1700s when the residents eked out a living by fishing and farming. With the discovery of iron ore at the end of the next century, Belle Island began to prosper. In 1893, a representative of the Nova Scotia Steel and Coal Corporation visited Belle Island and examined deposits of ore that had been found there. The company purchased land from the Butler family and obtained a mining lease for the northwestern portion of the island. The company also took out the submarine rights after their engineer noticed that the veins were dipping under the sea. Soon a new town was being constructed in the area. A company executive, Colonel Thomas Cantley, named the town Wabana, an Indian word meaning place of first light, and before too long, the first mining operations began. The first mines were open-pit quarries, where the ore beds, already exposed, could be broken up and loaded onto ore cars. 150 miners worked the mines and loaded 100 tons a day. The loaded cars crossed the island by track to the south side, or front, as it was commonly known, to the Scotia Pier. The pier was built on the south shore, as there was insufficient water depth on the opposite side of the island. On December 30th, 1895, the SS Bonavista left Belle Island, conveying the first load of iron ore to the blast furnaces of Nova Scotia. In 1896, the workers went on strike, but their endeavors to earn an increase in pay were unsuccessful. Of the 12 ore beds which reached out under Conception Bay, only 3 were commercially viable. In 1899, the Nova Scotia Steel Corporation sold the land-based portions of the upper non-productive beds to the Dominion Iron and Steel Corporation. The rich mineral beds they kept for themselves. Dominion Iron and Steel soon laid its own track across the island to the location of what was to become known as the Dominion Pier. As production started to increase, people from Conception Bay, other areas of Newfoundland, and around the world, including people from China, Hungary, and Germany, soon migrated to Belle Island. Many of these individuals brought valuable mining experience with them. While most of the island-born workers lived in places like Lance Cove, others resided in Wabana, which by the turn of the century exceeded 1,300 people. Wabana became the first big company town in Newfoundland, although it was a shack town consisting of a company store, staff houses, and other amenities. In 1901, the workers received a mere 10 cents an hour. When they unionized later that year, they finally won the extra 1 to 2.5 cents per hour that they couldn't get during the strike of 1896. In 1902, demands exceeded what the outcroppings could supply, and tunneling underground to the northwest began. By 1906, the tunnels had reached the edge of the island, and they soon traveled beneath the floor of Conception Bay. Underground, the ore handlers, or muckers as they were known, dug out under the bay in a number of different directions, establishing deck or pit heads as they were needed. Miners were assigned a variety of specific tasks.
When I went down the mines in 1938, after a while I got a job as trammer, that is looking after cars. We'd drop 6 empties on the siding and we pick up the 6 full ones. We bring them down to a landing where the main locomotive would pick them up and bring them out to the pocket. The other fellows were chuckers, that's drillers, helpers, and some were driving locomotives and what they call ballasting the road, filling in the between the ties to keep the road in place. And some were face cleaners, just cleaning down the roof. When I went into where we had to work, of course, we had to see that there was enough empty cars on each landing for the men to start in working. And if there was any full ones there, we had to take them out and put the empties in. So there was men had to load 8 cars by hand in these early days. Very few machinery. So we had to make sure that these men were kept busy getting the right cars for that day.
The work was tedious, labor-intensive, and often dangerous. After drillers prepared the rock face, blasters moved in and placed dynamite charges in the holes, which were completed by the previous shift. Once these charges were exploded, the most dangerous part of the operation took place. Face cleaners removed the loosened overhead rock before the shovelers came in to complete the operation. Working underground, there was always the chance of an accident.
It was in April 1938, accumulation of gas built up and for some unknown reason exploded, and it was quite a racket for a while, and then it grew very still. But I was in the area in the capacity of being a trammer. That meant I was lowering cars down to that particular room for men to load, and picked up the full ones. So then, of course, men came from everywhere then to help out, especially the safety crew. And the bodies were taken and injured people were taken out to the main slope and then up to the surface.
Miner William Anthony had a premonition of a disaster that would eventually cost him his life in April 1954.
Before he left for the last time, he never came home after, only in his casket. He asked me what would I do if ever anything happened to him on Bell Island. So I told him I'd do the very best I could and everything. Well, he said, I got to ask you one thing. Promise me that you'll never marry anyone else and take another man in over the children. I said, you got no worries about that. I said, I never will. He said, is that a promise? I said, yes, that's a promise. Anyway, I said, you shouldn't talk like that. He said, no, but he said, that's the place I think I'm going to lose my life, on Bell Island. I said, don't say that anymore. I said, I don't like that. He said, well, that's my mind anyway. But I did promise him that, and no more I didn't. I never, ever married. I was only 36 then, and today I'm 78. And I never, ever married. And I suppose I'll never will now.
Horses pull the empty cars around the mine in early operations. Working from an underground stable, teamsters hook the horses onto the cars and haul them to various locations around the mine. They were eventually moved to a central location for transport to the surface. 2 cable-operated tramways were utilized to deliver the ore from the mine site to the piers. The first lowered the empty cars into the mine and returned the loaded cars to the surface. Once above ground, the rock was transported by conveyor belt to the crusher. The separated rock was then dropped onto a second slow-moving conveyor belt known as the pick-and belt. Young boys and men positioned along this belt removed the rock while the ore was transported to a holding pocket. From there, the ore was dropped into empty cars for transport to the ships. Bell Island's second tramway, operating on a continuous cable, allowed loaded ore cars to travel unassisted across the entire width of the island. The ore was delivered to the loading docks while the empty cars returned to the mine. During World War I, vital European markets were eliminated. The Nova Scotia Steel Corporation managed to ship its ore to Sydney, while the Dominion Iron and Steel Corporation was forced to shut down and lay off approximately 1,500 workers. Both of these companies were soon forced to sell out to the new and short-lived British Empire Steel Company, otherwise known as BESCO. When this operation failed, the mines were administered by the National Trust Company. In 1930, the Dominion Steel Company, or DOSCO, assumed the operations. During the Depression of the early 1930s, only one mine was being worked, and miners still received little pay.
There was a 10-hour shift at that time, 1938, so you went to the dry house in the morning and you got in your pit clothes, and you went to the lamp cabin and passed in your brass, and they gave you a lamp, which was your property for that day, and also you had to look after it. At that time, we were getting 32 cents an hour, back in 1938, for a 10-hour day. We used to bring home $19.20 for the week. A 6-day week now, 60 hours.
Nazi Germany's demand for iron ore expanded until by 1938, a total of 4 mines on the island were in operation. The last shipment of ore bound for the steel mills and munition factories of Germany left Bell Island during the last week of August 1939, just a week prior to the outbreak of World War II. When war erupted, all shipments to Germany ceased. Great Britain and Sydney, however, needed iron ore for their war production effort. To meet these demands, loaded ore ships from Bell Island often joined convoys traveling from North America to England. During September and November 1942, German U-boats torpedoed and sank 4 ore carriers that were lying at anchor in the Tickle. Several seamen were rescued. However, 69 sailors lost their lives.
Me and my father beat it to the beach as fast as we could come down here to the beach. We had an old flat there on the beach. The luxury to have the paddles was in the flat and everything. And we weren't long going out there and brought him in. The wharf was right here at that time.
Must have been some mess.
Oh, people screaming in the water, screaming and screeching. Some fellas with life jackets on and more hanging on to pieces of plank. Some were alive and there was people dead then. From the shock, I suppose, we could see there was some dead. But the fellows would hold on to the piece of plank with no life jackets on. Them were the ones that we brought in. We started in bringing loads of them, right? The first cousin of mine, Adrian Reese, lived there on the hill. He only had one arm. He lost his arm in a gunning accident. And boy, he came down to the boat right there and picked this fellow up just like a sack of spuds and brought him up. Now, there was a shed that belonged to Reese and another one over there. That's where they brought him in those sheds, eh? And there's a woman up on the hill there, Mrs. Hammond, and by golly, Mrs. Steve Hammond. She went out in the water down there, right out to her neck, and caught one fellow. Swam into that, and he was just about gone, exhausted. And she hauled him in the beach, eh?
The U-boat captains had no problem navigating the waters of Conception Bay. They had either first-hand knowledge or had received information from associates who once sailed German ore carriers to and from Bell Island. Scotia Pier suffered a direct hit from a torpedo during one of the U-boat attacks. A great deal of damage resulted. Fortunately, no lives were lost. To prevent further damage from enemy action, defense booms were soon placed around both the Dominion and Scotia Piers. When the war ended in 1945, Bell Island's prosperity increased steadily, and the population grew to more than 8,000 people. In the early 1950s, DOSCO modernized their operation. Several new pieces of electrically operated equipment, including the joy loader, were brought in. After blasting operations were completed, this machine was used to scoop up the ore. Its continuous conveyor belt transferred the rock into the ore cars. An electric train system replaced the horses. Ore cars were brought to a central location before being hauled up the long grade to daylight. Huge 20-ton diesel trucks replaced the tramway. These were introduced as their capacity far exceeded that of the tramway, which now fell by the wayside. The trucks, however, soon proved too costly and were succeeded by the world's longest continuous conveyor belt system. It stretched from the main level of number 3 slope, which was about 2.5 miles underground, to the surface, and for approximately another 2 miles across the island to the pier. Another conveyor belt then transferred the ore directly into the ships. A number of layoffs occurred in 1957 when AV Row Canada Limited acquired Dosco. 2 years later, number 6 mine closed. Despite the closure, peak production was reached in 1960. In 1961, the island's population reached its peak and exceeded 12,000 people. In 1962, AV Row sold out to Hawker Siddeley. Bell Island's customers soon began to use a higher grade of iron ore, which was more readily available in other parts of the world, such as Labrador. Modern surface mining techniques were both economical and productive. Bringing low-grade iron ore from miles out under the surface soon proved too costly. Unable to compete in the international marketplace, the mines were forced to cease production and closed on June 30th, 1966. Equipment and land were sold to the Newfoundland government, and all but one of the pitheads were filled in. Over time, the once proud structures and equipment lay in ruin throughout the landscape. The population of Bell Island quickly declined as the residents sought employment elsewhere. A proportion of the island's inhabitants commuted to and from work in neighboring St. John's. During this same period, a modern-day hospital was constructed to serve the medical needs of the residents, and a vocational school was built to encourage training and retraining. These were two of a number of attempts made by the provincial government to create new opportunities for islanders. The now abandoned mines were also considered for use as an oil storage facility and as a mushroom farm, though neither of these ideas has come to pass. Today, Bell Island attracts many visitors who begin their trip to the island from Portugal Cove. Modern ferries run daily across the Tickle. The 20-minute journey passes too quickly as the island's rugged shoreline imposes its grandeur. After docking, a short drive up from the beach brings the visitor to the town of Wabana. Main Street remains the center of the community. Nearby, one of the original ore cars is on display. The Bell Island Museum has numerous artifacts and photos on display. This memorabilia is all that remains of a way of life that faded into history long ago. Bell Island's famous murals are displayed at various locations throughout Wabana. They depict scenes of mining activity and the town during its heyday. The former Cabot College displays one of the more popular murals depicting miner Billy Parsons. The south shore of the island, just west of the ferry terminal, brings the adventurous traveler to the remains of the Dominion Pier. Having long outlived its usefulness, the pier now lies abandoned. Scotia Pier is found a short distance further west. Layered walls of sandstone and shale tower high above the pathway to the deserted site where the German torpedo struck so many years ago. Rusting steel girders and crumbling concrete are all that remain of the gigantic loading gantry that had once been a beehive of activity. From the holding pocket atop the remains of Scotia Pier, the abandoned tramway bed directs visitors toward the north shore. A grotto is located further west on the road to Lance Cove. Depicting the Stations of the Cross, it's found at the site of the former Sacred Heart Roman Catholic Church. On Lance Cove Beach, an anchor from the PLM-27, one of the 4 vessels sunk during enemy action, forms part of a monument. This area is dedicated to the men who lost their lives during the U-boat attacks of 1942. On the island's north shore, An area known as the Greaves Nest sits high atop a large stone pillar. A tunnel, fashioned through the rock by fishermen for access to a more suitable beach, is also located in this cove. Number 4 mine may be found a short distance away. The shaft's entrance is now sealed, however, curious visitors can venture a few meters inside. Further east, the bulldozed remains of another mine entrance is clearly visible. A lighthouse positioned at the eastern tip of the island has signaled ships traveling Conception Bay since 1940. The present lighthouse has been in operation since 1965. Here, eroded cliffs tower high above the ocean. An equally dramatic landscape is found at the extreme western end of the island. The guns of the 1st Coast Defense Battery still overlook the area known as the Front. Once fired in self-defense, they now lie silent. A hiking path leading from this area to the beach offers a spectacular view which includes the ferry terminal below. The beach is an ideal place to take in the sun on a summer afternoon. The refreshing waters of Conception Bay offer a place to enjoy a relaxing swim. A monument to the marine disaster of 1940 is also located in this area. Each year, the island celebrates Bell Island Day. People of all ages can experience the festive atmosphere. There is always plenty of food and drink, as well as numerous games of chance. From its beginnings as a farming and fishing community to a prosperous mining boomtown to a commuter suburb, the island has witnessed innumerable changes. A proud community that looks forward to the future with hope and optimism welcomes visitors to their home, Bell Island.